Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about ancient legacies in Total War Pharaoh for all of the major geographic areas. Now there is an option that does unlock these ancient legacies independently of which land you're going to be in. So you can go with all of them regardless of where you are. Now, we are going to start talking about Egypt because that's the faction I've chosen. For Egypt, you do have the Conqueror, the Merchant, the Heretic, and the Builder. So you have 4 of them. This is more than anyone else. And there are some choices that are great, other choices that are not so great. Let me start with what is, from my particular perspective, the worthless choice, and that is the Conqueror. So what the Conqueror does, let's go select this legacy and just go over the options. So this is how this will work. You select a target city that you say you want to conquer, right? Let's take, Ascalon as an example. And what you're going to be doing is you're going to have a series of dilemmas over here in order to conquer the city. Now, these kind of dilemmas will give you certain benefits, like for instance, revealing enemy garrison, reducing the siege holdout time, getting reinforcements, or reducing the happiness of a particular region. Now, dependent on what kind of choices you've made, you will be given certain benefits. Rinse, repeat. That is how this entire system works. It's a balancing between sabotage and native support. You can either get a bunch of units over here, like mercenaries, so you can get, a bunch of Haribos, or you can get a bunch of axemen and archers, or you can get a good chunk of resources, as well as replenishment. Now, here's my reasoning as to why I don't believe this is worth it at all. First off, it takes freaking time. So you're going to have to wait multiple turns in order to achieve this. This can be good if you're looking to set up for a distant city that's going to take you some time. Fair enough, you don't need line of sight to be able to set this up, but at the same time, when you're going to march into a city, you shouldn't march against the city unless you're certain you're going to win anyway, regardless of this. So this to me just seems like a gimmick. It can give you a couple of extra benefits, but overall, I would certainly not recommend this legacy at all. And remember, one important thing, we're not comparing legacies in a vacuum, we're comparing them to one another over here. So this legacy, compared to the other Egyptian ones, and honestly all the others as I see it, is genuinely the worst in the game. So, moving on to another Egyptian. The second legacy to talk about with respect to Egypt, and the second worst, or the third best, regardless of how you want to view it, is the Builder over here. So with the Builder, you construct ancient monuments. You get a couple of benefits over here. So you can either make a great pyramid, you can make gardens over here, colossal statues, the black obelisk, or the mortuary temple. Now, these do need to be built in specific areas, so this is actually probably the only legacy that you can't really effectively use unless you're, looking to conquer Egypt as, say, the Hittites as an example, or the Mesopotamians. This is not necessarily the kind of legacy that you'd want to use. The benefits of all of this just don't really feel that great. So you need to construct a wonder. You need to take time to construct a wonder. It costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of resources. And then you get the stat bonus that doesn't necessarily feel all the effort you put in. Because let me be blunt. Happiness is not an issue in the game. You have so many structures that give you happiness, so many options to deal with that, it's irrelevant. Diplomatic relations could be a bit useful. Certainly with the Egyptians, undeniably so. But that's the only one over there. Legitimacy and victory points, meaningless. Then you have the Great Gardens. 20 food. Nile farms. Food is meaningless. Influence. Not meaningful whatsoever. Moving on, colossal statues, a bit more useful. Armor-piercing missile damage, melee attack for elite Pharaoh units. Okay, they all give legitimacy and victory points. The black obelisk, stone, bronze, and gold in all regions in Nubia and Kush. So this is particularly useful for Amun Mes, as well as influence in Nubia and Kush. Could be a bit useful, but only early on, really. Like, this would be great early on, especially for that influence benefit, because of all the issues you deal with in terms of influence, but not so much later on. Prayer duration and favor to all gods, yeah, just throw it out the door. In some ways, you could even argue this is worse than a Conqueror, because at least the Conqueror gives you some real benefits, but at the same time, it's a gimmick. At least this gives you some long-term benefits as opposed to a cache of resources in some units that you can care less about all that much. So not a great situation, really, with these two. The other two legacies for the Egyptians, however, are in a very different state of affairs. The second legacy would be a 10, the Heretic. Revive a 10 and subdue all other fates under the encompassing rays of the sun. It is important to note that if you're going to go down this particular legacy, that any and all shrines that you will capture from the enemy will not be useful to you. So just bear that aspect in mind. So what does a 10 do? Well, let's take a look at it. You combine two gods to get some fairly significant benefits. I'd probably recommend some gods that give you, things like workforce growth over there from Ra, for instance, would be pretty good, as well as the gold benefit that Fa can give you over here. Though you might want to unlock all of the gods from the very beginning of your campaign if you're going to go for this. You could also go with Isis, so let's just say Isis and Isis and Ra over there makes sense, and you create this new god. That's not quite how a 10 worked, but this is the mechanic they've decided to go with. And you get those benefits in your faction. The chosen benefits that you've got, that you've desired, that you've chosen to go with. And the more you level up, you can also assign an effect to higher tiers. So you'll go up with your regular tiers until tier 3, and then you can go up all the way to tier 7, which is reasonable enough. It's like you would be gaining this favor anyway in a regular campaign, just not with the same god. So basically, instead of dealing with 3 gods, you just deal with 1. So all the extra god slots, they're not really important in a campaign where you do decide to go with the 10. Furthermore, you can get 2 generals to be devoted to a particular god. And so there are some very tangible benefits over here with the 10. But that is not all. There's more to this than just that. There's also this city. So this particular city gives you some fairly tangible benefits over here beyond the fact that it's cult center, so it will help you increase prosperity, and you can only take it if you worship a 10. It is a pretty powerful city with, well, a whole bunch of food that you can use as the cult center of Atonism. So a 10, some fairly significant benefits throughout the course of your campaign. If you're looking to play a long campaign as Egypt, like when I'm saying long campaign, I mean exceptionally long campaign, this genuinely might be the best one to go for, because the kind of benefits you get are just like significant benefits that you're going to be able to get faction wide. And having multiple generals on the same page, 2 generals on the same page, is useful. Though keep in mind you will lose that 3rd general slot that you could get in a regular campaign. Can be useful in short term, can be especially useful in the long term. It does take some time, obviously, to rebuild that city that is ruined, but certainly the benefits over here are fairly clear and fairly evident. But what could be better than that? Caravans! Let's get into that particular. And finally, for the Egyptian factions or the Egyptian legacies, you have the Merchant. The very best one. By the way, it should be pointed out something about the 10. It's not just the Egyptian gods you can combine with that. It's also other gods if you have them unlocked, which is useful because you may have gods with the same kind of effect in different religions. Most of the time you do. And you end up with ridiculously powerful benefits if you do so. Anyway, with the merchant, it's pretty simple to understand this one. Very, very simple, but extremely powerful to go for it. So here's how it works. When you select the merchant, your capital will be chosen as the initial location. And from there, you will be sending out caravans. But you need to send various things in a caravan in order to trade with other factions. Now, various factions will value different things differently, basically. Some will want food more, others will want gold or bronze, and so on and so forth. And they will offer various things in return for that. Now, it's not necessarily important that you bring exactly what they want, but something along those lines will benefit you immensely. Quite crucially about this is that not only do you get resources. So for instance, let's say I want to send a caravan over here from Kush to Nubia, right? I stock up on the oasis fruit. I get 10 of them. I spend 4,000 food. Okay, so that's 4,000 resources. Here's what and I can also spend in total for 10 of these 300 wood. Now, each of these is valued 10 points. Remember that. Well, here's the thing. Logs of ebony could be like 30 points. And I have 100 worth. You kind of start getting the idea here. Regardless of what materials you have and who you're trading with, you trade upwards. You get things like logs of ebony, which are significant significant wood benefit, or you get golden scarabs, which give you a ridiculous sum of gold. Or you get herd of cattle. And generally, even if you're trading within a same resource, there's some, keep in mind, you're not going to have an unlimited number of these, as I was able to get oasis fruit and Kushite training bows, but you will be able to get enough of these to really offset the cost of what you've spent. Maybe not in the resource that you spent, but still you'll be able to offset it. Or for instance, over here, let's say, they value food. For instance, I could stock up over here on the oasis fruit, Kushite training bows, and then send them over here to Nubia, and then pass them along, and then get with that herd of cattle, pass that along in the western desert, and get myself an enormous amount of bronze and stone. This is ridiculous. But it's not just resources that are at stake here, because if we look at these various locations, there's ancillary, so you can make these are basically items and you decide what to do. Some will just be resources. Others will either have you a provincial effect or an ancillary that you can get for yourself. So, an ancillary that reduces gold recruitment cost and gold upkeep. Very useful for those elite units. Or one that increases food and wood income. One that increases happiness or workforce growth. Point is, there's a lot over here that is on offer from these kind of factions that will benefit you immensely in your campaign. And this is one of those that, I would flat out say the merchant is the strongest in the game. Not necessarily the most fun to use. It's kind of lame in some ways, but the actual benefits cannot be ignored. The amount of money you can make from this makes it so that regardless of which faction you're playing, regardless of how strong or weak that faction is, this will bankroll your entire faction on a baseline level. You might have to put some resources initially and bear the pain, but typically speaking, you will have some caravan destination very close by within a turn, so just go for that, trade for whatever it is, get the money back, and even if it's not the resource you need, get whatever resources you can, and then trade those resources with other factions around you for what you actually need. Things like food, gold, and bronze. Or typically speaking, I'd say you want to usually get food from the AI factions and bronze. Those are the two bigger priorities. Stone and wood to some extent, though not quite as big as priority because you won't go bankrupt with stone and wood. You will with food and bronze. And gold to a certain extent. So those are some very tangible benefits that you do have available with the merchant. As I said, easily the strongest in the entire game. Not that there aren't others that are not not that there aren't other legacies that aren't strong. Like a 10 is pretty solid, but the raw amount of resources and various faction benefits can't be understated over here. Some caravans can be fast, others can be slow. For the Hittites, we have the Benevolent and Overseer. Let's take a look at the Benevolent. Out of the two legacies of Hatti, I would certainly recommend going for this one. The way this works is that you build gratitude with your people and your vassals. This gratitude can then be used for a number of things. Gain 1 use of instant construction in any settlement, equipment ancillary, embed informant in diplomacy to give you vision, gain 1 court action, and gain the effect tempered by war, which will give you experience from battles plus 25%. So you just gotta keep your population happy, and you gotta keep your vassals happy with good relations. So you're gonna want to do those things anyway, but there's more to it than just that. See, when you have vassals, there is a courtesy gift that you can get in special recruitment. Basically, your vassals occasionally will be sending you, and they'll do this naturally, but your vassals will occasionally send you all kinds of units that you can instantly recruit, or just recruit in general. And those will be very useful with courtesy gift, or they will give you resources, if I'm not mistaken. So with more gratitude for this ancient legacy, you're just increasing that kind of gift from your vassals. This is especially useful for Shupaluma, who does start as High Kings, and he did have a vassal. Not quite sure if he does have one. Yes, he does still have one vassal over here from the very beginning of the campaign. So you'll be gaining courtesy gifts if you build vassals. So one of the things to be said about Pharaoh is that you are incentivized to actually care about having allies and vassals and so on in general, and having those factions doing well in a campaign. It is important. It gives you a lot of benefits. It shouldn't be underestimated. But this is just increasing that kind of benefit that you do inherently have. Don't underestimate it. It's very useful, very good, very solid. It can grant you a lot of power over here. And compared to the other option, it's like it just completely blows it out of the water over here. It's not quite as powerful as, say, a 10 or the Merchant, but still a really powerful benefit all the same. But for the other ancient legacy of Hatti, you do have the Overseer. So let's take a look at what that has on offer. You have 5 general slots over here. That's one of the reasons, by the way, this is not as good. And what you do with the Overseer, you select one of your generals and you appoint him prince of one of your vassals. And this will grant you certain benefits, certain titles that you can use. So, you have something like Royal Steward over here as an initial title, other titles as well they do have access to. The reason I don't much care for this one is, while certainly those titles are useful, undeniably so, very, very useful titles, you're still consuming up slots, and there's plenty of decent titles available in other ways as well. And that is effectively all that you're really gonna get through all of that. And you can also improve diplomatic relations over here if you do have a prince available over here. So just keep in mind that particular aspect about it all. So it can help maintain your vassals in line, but honestly, I never have had issues maintaining good relations with my vassals, so this is really fluff in a lot of ways. Just some extra titles, that's all you're gonna get with that, as opposed to all the extra resources and instant construction, especially you get from the other one. For Mesopotamia, you have Sargon the Great or the Lawmaker. Looking at Sargon the Great, it's a fairly simple one to understand, at least in theory, in the sense that you select a scribe that can help you generate more ambitions over here. So ambitions are objectives that give you various rewards. And so you can get, let's say, a warlike one, and then you click the button over here to generate a new ambition and get extra rewards. That is pretty useful because there's a lot of rewards to be gained through that. It does cost you resources to generate one of these ambitions, but all the same, it is certainly pretty powerful in a lot of ways, though there is a cooldown to it, so it's not infinite. However, you just want to go to war with people, or you want to get various buildings and get various benefits from that, it is very much available, and it will grant you very tangible benefits in your campaign. Despite the fact that there are obviously going to be some limitations. However, you then have grand ambitions. Once you reach to tier 1 in any archetype category, they're more challenging to complete but provide greater rewards. So you're basically creating quests and objectives in your campaign as you're playing it. This can be great to really spice up the variety of your campaign. It's not necessarily as powerful as, say, the merchant, for instance, and all the resources you're getting, but I would say the tangible benefit here is not so much the actual power that this is going to give you. In fact, even for Mesopotamian legacies, there is the other one might be stronger. But in terms of creating campaign variety, I would certainly argue that this is the best legacy in the game. Not as powerful, not instant construction, not something like that, just flat rewards, but all the same, it is really nice to have that kind of variety. I just think of like Thrones of Decay. One of the reasons Malachi has the best campaign in the game right now in Warhammer 3 is because of that variety that he has in objectives. Here, it's a dynamic set of objectives that do get generated, and you choose to generate them, including random ambitions, which are bigger objectives. So this is a great system from my perspective, even if it isn't the most powerful in the game. For the other Mesopotamian legacy, you have the Lawmaker, and the way this works is, well, you create laws that have a number of benefits that can be provided to your faction. Now, you can use the resource over here, the Kuduros, in order to give you royal decrees instantly or convert laws into divine laws. Though keep in mind, divine laws cannot be removed. You can also use that resource to increase the rank of laws. So in order to, unlock some of the more powerful stuff over here, you are going to need to get Kuduros, and then you're going to need to spend them. So yes, you can use Kuduro to do so. You have civic and military laws. So looking at the kind of benefits that you do have access to in civic, you get things like just looking at the situation, you get things like food from buildings, prosperity crisis during collapse, and per vassal. Then you get things like construction cost, workforce cost, construction time for buildings, recruitment cost for all kinds of units, and then upkeep, and then happiness and influence. Now, the way the system works, let's say, we want to increase food production, right? Well, you select what value you want, and you can select multiple values. So let's say I just wanted to increase resource income from raiding stands, or let's just say happiness, right, from generals. Well, each of these effects requires a certain level in order to unlock. except the baseline one. Or you can make it less strong, but increase the duration, make them less strong, or even have a penalty, but make it so that the law is made faster. This is a benefit because the laws themselves can take quite a while to actually get going. So a very basic log over here that would just increase 6% stone and food production, but at the same time cost me happiness, would still take 4 turns, or 9 turns if I'm going with all of them as a baseline effect. So you gotta manage these effects. Now on top of that, you do also have, as I said, the military side of things, which can increase things like melee defense, speed, all kinds of stats for units. You can also increase experience over here. Though for units, for units, there are some things obviously that you can't, or in general, I'd say there are some things you can't decrease in order to speed up, various things. But all the same, you do have the same kind of mentality over here. Create laws, do them faster or slower, depending on what you want to go for, and get all those kind of benefits available in your faction. But on top of that, you can also get Kuduru by going into the court. It's not going to be available over here, but you have an action over here where you can discuss a law in order to get Kuduru, which again is a resource that you can spend. So there's a lot of power certainly to be gained from this. It's not quite the same campaign customization that obviously Sargon does give you, but certainly from a power strength, this is really powerful. I wouldn't say it's quite on the same level of the merchant, although you can get more powerful units than anyone else, so just keep that aspect in mind. You might want to actually use both of the Mesopotamian legacies. Like, it would be great to use multiple legacies at the same time. I think that should be an option in a campaign. Like, having multiple legacies that you're pursuing at the same time would certainly spice things up a lot. But I would recommend both Mesopotamian legacies. Like, you can use them wherever you are, basically. Really good, really nice to have. Certainly adds a lot more depth to the campaign. I really think that they did Mesopotamia the best out of all of the new stuff that they added. Actually, I would say the Mesopotamian area is just flat out the best area in the entire game right now. You have cavalry, you have all kinds of units, climate, and very interesting mechanics to deal with over here. Finally, we get into the Aegean. You have Atreus, the first Wanax, and Perseus, the hero. Atreus is certainly very fitting for Agamemnon, at least from role-playing perspective, because, well, he is part of the family or the dynasty of Atreus. So with Atreus, here's how it works. You have the dominance mechanic that Diomedes used to have in Troy. The way this mechanic works is a bit different than it did there. I'd say they've expanded it. So you have a series of objectives over here, like defeat the faction leader in battle, raid their territory for resources, and if you complete all of these objectives, you'll typically gain an ancillary of some kind. The raiding objective is annoying, everything else comes pretty natural. Now, what does this do? What does legitimacy do? Well, you do have various benefits over here, be it in court or in terms of diplomacy, and also with the power of the crown, so you can gain some extra legitimacy over here. If we look at the court situation, for instance, we can make a demand with legitimacy over here, even if we don't have regard. And we can also use it even if we have used our court action in that particular turn. I am pretty certain. Yeah. So you can make a demand, and that demand will be done with dominance. So the power over here is really in the court. The reason this is so powerful in the court is you want to get all those elite unit recruitments or lower army recruitment wages, or, do things like get favor with the gods, get temple builders, embezzle, or reduce builder wages, all that kind of stuff. then you certainly do have a huge level of power over here through dominance. Also, dominance is quite useful because it can allow you, if you're trying to bully a much weaker faction than you, in order to increase the likelihood of your success. It will only work with much weaker factions than you, but just bear in mind it is a huge level of power that you do have access to. Guess it fits Agamemnon's personality, certainly. And it does help him gain an advantage in the court, especially because he doesn't start as the supreme ruler of the Aegean. That's Priam. So he's in a weaker position, but with dominance you can really up the ante over there against the Trojans, or against your rivals in general. Finally, we have Perseus the hero. Now, this is based on two mechanics that did exist in Troy, one of which is the Suwa alliance that Hector could build up. The other one is the host king mechanic that Ajax had as part of the DLC, as well as adding some other benefits potentially with that. So what you can do over here is you can create a situation where you host games with the host game mechanic, offer certain rewards for factions over here, and then you host the games and you will gain certain benefits over here, as well as diplomatic relations. And also peace between all of these factions. So it's a way of gaining resources at the cost of items you may not need in a campaign. It is temporary. It does have a cooldown over there with hosting the game. So like 12 turns cooldown over here in this situation. Now, beyond that, you have quite a bit more than just hosting games every 12 turns. Initially, you can only host games between Danaans and Trojans. So Danaans are like Agamemnon, Odysseus, and so on. But at a higher level, you can host games for peace and diplomacy with all factions at the highest level. But how do you increase this level? It's not your territory that increases it. It's the territory that your allies have. So the more territory your allies have, then you're going to get unity. And if you get to over 100 unity, you get all of these benefits. So you're incentivized with Perseus to really maintain a network of alliances. Now, given Troy's starting situation with Thracians, Hittites, Achaeans, lack of factions that you can confederate, this is a very tangible benefit for them to use. But in general, it's a significant benefit. What it gives you from the start is global recruitment slots, +2, then all the way to +7. Then it also increases your diplomatic relations and reduces the recruitment cost for special recruitment, which is a pretty damn significant benefit considering how expensive special recruitment can actually be in a campaign. But you will want to give territory to other factions. And in this case, we got a bunch of units as well as a reward. So yeah, there's a lot of benefits that you can get from over here, even if it is right, Perseus units. Perseus units like are just the units over here. So that's quote unquote the global recruitment that we're talking about over here. So it's only really those units. Again, this is going to incentivize you to have allies, to maintain those alliances, and also your own units. To have allies, to maintain those alliances, to be strong, to grow strong together. So if you want to put your diplomatic skill to the test, this is the system for it. Personally, I'm a big fan of the Mesopotamian ones. I think they did a pretty solid job with the Aegean ones as well. So I think all 4 that they added with Dynasties, pretty solid. Out of the initial ones, honestly, a 10 is kind of okay, and the builders just raw power. The other ones are fluff. Like, yes, instant construction is all well and nice, but you already have instant construction by default with gold. And you do get to a point where, yeah, you're just going to be doing that. But still, fairly tangible benefits with that one at least. Costin here signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.